Welcome back to the Twinspires Racing Roundtable. I'm Ashley Anderson here with James Scully and Vance Hanson, back for some point counterpoint to talk about a lot of Breeders' Cup, which is about a month away. We're going to look at the Classic and where Baeza fits into the equation off his Pennsylvania Derby win. We'll also talk about the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint after Haulin got a victory in the Grade 3 Princess Rooney. And as always, what else caught our eye from the weekend? But let's start with that Pennsylvania Derby where Baeza got his first stakes win finally and now is pointed toward the Breeders' Cup Classic. So, James, do you give this 3-year-old a chance to finish in the top 3 in the Breeders' Cup Classic?
Well, I won't be surprised to see Baeza finish up for a minor award in the Breeders' Cup Classic, but I will just say it's a tall task for him. He's basically had run his last race in the Jim Dandy in late July, where he turned in a respectable runner-up effort to Sovereignty. And he continued to progress off that effort nearly 2 months later in the Pennsylvania Derby. Now he gets another big rest. He's basically going to have one race in a 95-day period leading into the Breeders' Cup Classic. And I think a lot of these late blooming 3-year-olds we see come along have just been able to string wins together, which he hasn't been able to because he didn't break his maiden until February, and he jumped right from that win 2 months or 7 weeks later to the Santa Anita Derby. So I'm not going to fault his performances because they have been definitely really solid and very encouraging. I mean, you have 5 consecutive triple-digit Bristol speed ratings, 3 consecutive late triple-digit late pace numbers. I mean, he's got the profile of an up-and-coming 3-year-old who could make some noise. But like I said, this field magnitude had been a bit exposed against Sovereignty and the Travers, and Secret Oath won this race last year, and he didn't run as fast. He wasn't as impressive, but I mean, it's still asking a lot for Baeza because I do think this year's Breeders' Cup Classic field is really loaded. You've got a really strong group of older horses, and then you have Sovereignty and Journalism that are just much more battle tested and have still run faster numbers than Baeza. But, we'll watch his performance here. This pace was pretty solid. He dropped back and finished real impressively. I won't take anything away from his effort, Vance.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on a lot of his attributes. He is an up and coming 3-year-old. He's just peaking at the right time. A mile and a quarter is really going to hit him between the eyes. But as you mentioned, this is probably one of the deepest Breeders' Cup Classic fields we've seen in a number of years. He's going up against Sovereignty and Journalism for the fourth time this season, and he has yet to finish ahead of either one of them. So if Sovereignty and Journalism both run their race in the Breeders' Cup Classic, then I don't see Baeza, you know, improving enough to beat one or both of them to the wire. And then you mentioned the older group of older horses, Fierceness and Sierra Leone. Both have been relatively inconsistent this year, but we both remember, or we all remember, how good both of them ran in the Breeders' Cup Classic last year, finishing first and second, and they could easily run back to that effort. So I think Baeza certainly has a shot at hitting the board, but there's a lot standing in his way to do so, both from his fellow 3-year-olds and the older horses.
I think you make a good point, Vance. Going up against Sovereignty and Journalism, we've already seen that Baeza is clearly number 3 in that equation, and Sovereignty and Journalism are a step ahead. But I do think this Pennsylvania Derby, the way that he won this race, showed some improvement tactically as well, coming from way off the pace. And then had Hector Barrios aboard, who had the mount previously in his career. Flavian Pratt obviously had it in the Derby and Belmont. So it'd be interesting to see if Baeza ends up with Flavian back in the Breeders' Cup Classic. But cool to see Hector get the mount back and do well in this Pennsylvania Derby competition. As you mentioned, James, not the toughest among these 3-year-olds with Magnitude, who I did think showed a new element as well, sitting off the pace and being able to close well in the stretch, usually go straight to the front. Obviously did not get the lead in the Pennsylvania Derby, but competition wise, we already know Journalism, Sovereignty, probably a step above Baeza. And then I think, Fierceness, Sierra Leone, whoever shows up that day, probably going to finish top 3. I just think Baeza maybe more 4th, 5th, or 6th for me in that Breeders' Cup Classic at this point. But next year certainly has a bright future.
And I will say, as far as magnitude, I do think he could be a very good 4-year-old for Steve Asmussen, and but you referenced it. That's not among one of the tougher 3-year-old fields you'll see, and he's going to step up to face much tougher.
Let's move over to the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint. We had Haulin punch her ticket to that race with her winning the Grade 3 Princess Rooney. It was the 3rd straight year that Safi Joseph had a winner in that race. And last year he had the upset winner in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint with Sullivan Angel. So maybe we have another potential upset with Haulin. But Vance, do you think she's fast enough to win the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint at 7 furlongs at Del Mar?
On paper, no, but you referenced Sullivan Angel. I didn't think Sullivan Angel was fast enough on paper to win the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint last year. And the Filly and Mare Sprint has been kind of it's either been dominated by really heavy favorites in recent years or has been won by outrageous long shots. Sullivan Angel was one, Shamrock Rose and A Bar of Gold were others in the last 10 years. So Haulin would not be my top pick right now, or even probably among my top 3, but given the results that we've seen in the Filly and Mare Sprint over the last decade, I wouldn't put it past her to outrun some of the more accomplished fillies that are going to show up there. And as you mentioned, Safi Joseph has won the Princess Rooney 3 years in a row, and he's got a very good quality filly here. He also had another one in Mystic Lake who won at Parks on Saturday as well. So he's going to go to the Filly and Mare Sprint pretty loaded. And Haulin is a really fast filly. Maybe she could outrun him. Who knows?
James, where do you think Haulin stacks up with the projected field for the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint?
I think first off, last year Sullivan Angel was in the right place at the right time. She had run in 38 consecutive races at a mile or longer prior to the Princess Rooney. She relished that cutback that day and got up in time in a Filly and Mare Sprint where, unfortunately, I thought a lot of the top contenders, Ways and Means, Vava, Scylla, others, were just over the top by that point in the season. Now, there is something to be said for coming into this race, and she's a filly that's run triple-digit numbers before, so it's not necessarily the speed, whether she's fast enough or can put forth a number on paper that would be good enough to win this year's Filly and Mare Sprint. I don't think you're going 7 furlongs against the competition she's going to face. This was her in 3 previous starts at 7 furlongs. Haulin had lost all 3 of them. She finally got a win at the distance, but and first time since early in her career. She had won earlier in her career at the distance. But she's a filly who's made a living to me at 6 and 6.5 furlong stakes. She had won 5 straight prior to the Princess Rooney, and just the ease of the trip she got, I think benefited her for running a really good race over 7 panels on this occasion. But she's a front runner who's not going to get any breathers in the Filly and Mare Sprint, or I don't project her to get any breathers, and I think she'll be vulnerable at Del Mar.
That was my question mark. Is she a need the lead type? She has won from off the pace at 7 furlongs. That was in the Azalea Stakes at Gulfstream back in 2024 in July. But lately, it looks like she's a need the lead type. And competition-wise in Gulfstream, I'm not really sure if she's facing the toughest. But then you look at Sweet Azteca. That looks like, to me, the clear front runner to get the early lead, looking at the early fraction she's put up. And then Hope Road, I'm thinking maybe sits off the pace. You got Copian in there who, obviously does her best running at 7 furlongs. Ways and Means didn't look the best last year in the Filly and Mare Sprint, but certainly could bounce back and has 4 straight triple-digit speed figures. So I just think right now Haulin still needs to move forward a little bit against this competition. But like you mentioned, Vance, long shots can come through, and certainly Safi Joseph long shots.
And I think definitely Hope Road and Sweet Azteca and Hope Road. They're both quality speed, and they're both coming into the race off of sharper wins. So they're going to be part of the mix. And then Copian's the other big contender in that field. No reason, I think, if she's doing well for Richard Mandela, she can't run a huge race on November 1st.
Do we know, is Kilwin gonna try to get to the Breeders' Cup, or is she
Yeah,
going
I think
to?
so. I think she's going to run in the Thoroughbred Club of America potentially. I don't know for sure where her next race is, but I do know that Bill Mott confirmed that she's going back to dirt and is going to stick with dirt. So it's definitely, I think, in the cards. I just don't know if there's enough
Or
time
wait,
off.
Kilwin isn't Kilwin
Rusty
That.
Arnold, I
Rusty
believe.
on?
Oh, Rusty Arnold. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Rusty Arnold.
you
I'm
might be
so
thinking about
sorry.
Ragtime, which I think Ragtime should try to
No,
run
no,
in the
no, no,
Breeders'.
no. Ragtime, but wasn't running on turf. Kilwin went and ran on
Right.
turf at Kentucky Downs and did not run well. And Rusty Arnold said after the race, "My apologies, I had the trainers wrong. That Kilwin's going to stick with dirt. If she's going to run, and she's going to need a prep, and she'll probably run at Keeneland
Raven
in the
Run.
Thoroughbred Club of America.
Oh,
But I'm not sure that she's going to be ready for that race."
I thought you maybe when you said Bill Mott, we're thinking of Ragtime, who won this weekend, and I think looks like a good contender for the Breeders' Cup Filly Mare Sprint, but I'm not
I
sure
think
if
we're all
she's.
going to be in unison on that.
Okay. Well,
All
I'll
right.
get to that point soon, but I'll let you start, James, with your 2-year-old report for our final point of the show.
Yeah, let me pull my papers up. I'm going to start right at Churchill Downs last Friday. Maxfield has a 7.0 average win distance. He's not throwing a lot of like precocious short distance first out sprinters, but he had a son called Englishman, excuse me, that debuted on Friday's fifth race, and I thought he put on an absolute show. Broke on top or broke, up close, showed immediate speed to get the lead, and we'll watch it right here. Just put on I thought a brilliant show through the stretch to draw off. Really got a 97 Brisnet speed rating for this performance. First out at 7 furlongs. This is a colt that looks like he's got a big time potential. He's out of a Speightstown mare, but there's a lot of other stamina influences in that female family, and I think Englishman is extremely, has huge promise for Cherie DeVoe. The other one I'll mention at Los Al came on Saturday in the opener with Meaning. This is a filly to be watching out for in any upcoming 2-year-old filly stakes and is a potential Kentucky Oaks prospect next year for Michael McCarthy. It's a gun runner filly out of an Into Mischief mare. Like I said, Meaning is her name, and she showed speed from the start, going 6.5 furlongs, drew off to win by 3.5 lengths. She was 3-10 odds for Michael McCarthy. The word was out on her, and she certainly ran to that. So I'll be excited to see what Meaning does with her next start. Got a couple nice runners in both a colt and a filly this week in the maiden watch.
An Englishman, I don't know if you mentioned it, was 2/5 of a second off the track record at 7 furlongs set by Groupie Doll. So
Yeah, he went
quite
108
the
and
debut.
Yeah, he went 108 and 3, and then just really drew off in that final eighth of a mile, and he really ran straight through the stretch. So couldn't have been more impressive visually, and it was a fast race like you referenced.
Vance, what caught your eye this weekend?
Well, last Friday afternoon at Fairmount Park, not usually a track that we pay attention to, but it did host the St. Louis Derby for 3-year-olds, and it was a comeback performance by Disco Time, homebred for Juddmonte, trained by Brad Cox. We had not seen Disco Time since his come from behind win in the Lecomte Stakes at Fairgrounds back in January, but he returned with a plum on Friday afternoon, took the lead, and never looked back. Won by 5.5 lengths, and we'll see him here in the final quarter of a mile. Very easy lead here, and some of the main contenders in here were scratched and ran in Churchill Downs on Saturday in a different race, but this was a pretty impressive comeback for Disco Time. He wound up earning a 103 Brisnet speed rating. He's now 4 for 4. And I was reading some comments ahead of the St. Louis Derby. Brad Cox kind of took it easy with this horse after the Lecomte last January. If we remember the Lecomte, it did not come back a very fast race. Cox thought he needed some time off, probably some time to mature, get faster. Looks like it was a great decision because he came back really strong here. And so this horse has got, I think, a bit of a future in the short term. looking at the stake schedule at fairgrounds in Oaklawn this coming winter, there's lots of opportunities in the listed and grade 3 ranks for older horses. He's not going to run out of opportunities to run in and improve over the winter. So Disco Time, a horse to watch out for this winter for sure.
I'd almost forgotten about him. When I pulled up the past performances, I was like, oh yeah, the LeCompte. And then he just kind of disappeared.
I I thought that Chunk of Gold and others would have been in trouble if they'd gone to Fairmount because Disco Time was awesome in that comeback win. I thought it was much. I thought it was a better performance than his LeCompte, like you referenced, and even his maiden and allowance victories. That really stamped him as a colt to watch. He's by not this time, and to me is getting a be interesting. He hasn't gone past a mile and a 16th. His female family sort of speedy, but he looks like a long striding type. So very encouraging with comeback performance.
And being by not this time, you'd think maybe even try grass at some point. Who knows?
Yeah.
James Chunk of Gold ended up being in trouble at Churchill Downs too, which is part of my stakes report, I guess you could say, for Saturday. There were 4 stakes on the card, and I thought the standout performance was Ragtime, who we kind of talked about in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint as a potential contender, but you're watching right here in the Grade 3 Dogwood. She's a 3-year-old trained by Bill Mott and Junior Alvarado, paired up to get this win here. Won by 2 1/4 lengths in her 4th career start, has only raced at 7 furlongs, and her only loss was just barely to Kilwin in the grade 1 test. So this was her second try against Stakes Company and looked very professional getting the win here. She's a Union Rags filly, and like I said, I think Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint is certainly in the picture, but I don't know what the plan is after this race. There was also another Godolphin homebred, and that was champion 2-year-old filly Immersive. Got her first win as a 3-year-old on Saturday in the Seneca Overnight Stakes. She ran a mile and a 16th over a fast track in 1:42.64, and really I thought didn't have much of a challenge except for Ivory and Ebony kind of in that stretch run, but Immersive was able to pull away and finally get the job done, improved her speed figure to a 93, had an 85 and an 86 to start the year when she was second in the Monomoy Girl and the Coaching Club American Oaks. And then those 2 other stakes races, we had the grade 2 Amsterdam winner Smokin' Wicked come to Churchill and get a win over Jimmy's Dailies in the Harrods Creek Stakes at 7 furlongs. That was in a stakes record, only the 5th running of this event, but a stakes record of 121.73. Brian Hernandez Jr. was aboard. Obviously, I think most people have heard the news on Sunday, took a very serious spill and recovering now. So we're obviously wishing him very, very well. A good recovery, a fast recovery. And then finally, Chunk of Gold, ended up finishing second in the Bourbon Flight Stakes at a mile and 3/16. So it was a scratch depleted field. So that can certainly turn things on their head, and ended up brother Kenny got the win, a 1.5 length victory over the 9th place finisher in the Kentucky Derby, Chunk of Gold. So kind of a little bit of a fluke result, I would say, but when it's down to 3 horses, you just never know. We do have more stakes action though this weekend, hopefully less scratches. But
yeah, and I'll just say about Ragtime, I don't see any reason why she wouldn't go to the Filly and Mare Sprint. She could be she could be a stable companion for Sovereignty, who's going for the Breeders' Cup Classic for Bill Mott. And Bill Mott's had these up-and-coming sprinters. Now, Elite Power, it took him forever to break his maiden, so he did have more races. But the Vosburg was his first stakes attempt before he won the Breeders' Cup Sprint, the first of 2 back-to-back wins. And Ragtime's got sort of that similar profile where she reeled off a maiden, an allowance, and now she's got back-to-back stakes efforts under her. She looks poised to go for that Filly and Mare Sprint.
Yeah, I think Bill Mott has Scylla pointed toward Filly and Mare Sprint potentially as well, but Scylla's been on quite a losing streak, so I feel like Ragtime might be a better shot.
Well, she's coming off a decent second. Didn't she run second to Hope Road?
It seems like she's been second quite a bit.
I'm not
second,
100%
third.
sure
Yeah, but she hasn't gotten a win in a little while. Seems like she's settling for the minor awards. So
Ragtime has an enormous Ragtime has enormous promise, and she'll be running late in that Filly and Mare Sprint. That race collapsed last year, as we talked about earlier. So she's in with the chance.
Yeah, especially as Sweet Aztecas. That's that super hot pace that she normally does. But I think that's all the time we have today. We do have more stakes action for closing weekend of Churchill Downs. Tomorrow kicks off that 5-day race week, and we have the Grade 3 ACAC on Saturday, as well as the Grade 2 Lucas Classic, and then closing day on Sunday. So be sure to watch and wager. Follow our social channels. We'll have coverage on site for Saturday. And yeah, we'll see you next week on the Racing Roundtable.